My adopted brother feels as though the family doesn't love him. I can still hear his voice when he said it, calm but sharp, like he'd been holding it in for years and finally let it out. We were all sitting together that night, me, my siblings, and him, trying to figure out why he had become so distant from us, and when the words came out of his mouth, it was like everything in the room froze. It was the kind of thing you never expect to hear from your own brother, the one you grew up with, laughed with, fought with, made memories with. But there he was, looking straight at us, not even angry, just broken. And the scariest part, as soon as he started explaining, piece by piece, we realized he wasn't making it up. He wasn't exaggerating. He had stories, specific, painful, unforgettable, and some of us remembered them too. That was the moment that shattered everything. But before I get to how we ended up in that room, I need to explain how we even got there in the first place. My parents have 5 kids. The oldest is my sister, 27F, then my brother, 26M, then me and my twin brother, 23F and 23M, and then John, also 23M, who is adopted. John's biological parents were close friends of my parents, but they died when John was just a few months old. My parents stepped in, took him in, and raised him as their own. Or at least, that's what I always thought. Growing up, John was just my brother. We played together, we fought, we got in trouble for breaking things, we were loud, annoying, and normal. Nobody saw him as the adopted one. He was just John. But things started changing in ways we didn't fully notice until later. Looking back now, I can see some of the cracks forming, but at the time, I thought everything was fine. The first real shock was when John left the day he turned 18. I mean, literally the day. He graduated 1 semester early, and instead of applying for college like the rest of us, he packed up his things, got into the car he had bought with his own saved money, and left for an apartment. I cried that night. I begged my dad to make him come back because I was scared something bad would happen to him. My parents were sad too, but they were proud, so proud. They told everyone how independent John was, how mature and fearless. Dad even offered him money to help, but John refused. After that, the distance grew. At first, we told ourselves he was just busy, working, figuring out life, that once he settled down, he'd come back into the fold, but he didn't. Over the years, John's presence at family events became quick, almost robotic. He'd stop by for a birthday, shake hands, give a hug that felt rehearsed, share a few quick details about his life, and then leave. Thanksgiving and Christmas, in and out. It got to the point where some of us joked about how he acted like a soldier checking in with commanding officers instead of a son, but nobody really laughed. We all missed him, but no one knew how to pull him back in. Then, not long ago, my brother set up a group chat with all of us, except John, to finally talk about it. We all admitted we had noticed how distant he'd been, how strange his visits felt. In the end, we decided to sit him down and try to talk to him together. That's how we ended up in that room, begging him to tell us what was wrong. And that's when he dropped the bomb. I'm not their real son. At first, we all jumped in to reassure him. Of course you are. You're just as much part of this family as anyone. But John didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just calmly started laying out story after story, detail after detail, of the times he felt different. Like how Mom would let my older brother hug her or kiss her on the cheek, but she'd push John away if he tried the same. How Dad would stay up late helping us with homework, but when John asked, they'd say they were too tired, and to ask his teachers. Or the time Dad planned a hunting trip with all the boys, but didn't even think to invite John, until the very last minute, and when John said he was fine not going, Dad actually looked relieved. My brothers confirmed that one. They remembered it too. And as he kept going, we all just sat there in silence, because as much as we wanted to deny it, we remembered. He said he didn't take Dad's money at 18 because he didn't feel right about it. That money was for Dad's real children. And then he said the words that broke me. It would be inhuman of me to ask them to love me the way they love you. I understand that, but being around them reminds me of it too much, so I can't stay for long. I think my heart cracked in half when he said that. And yet, that wasn't even the worst part. Because later, when my sister told my mom and dad what John had said, the whole house turned upside down. Mom broke down crying, Dad punched a wall, and then came the confession that none of us were ready to hear. It was the one thing that explained everything John had felt, and it made me sick to my stomach. But that's where I'll stop for now. When my sister finally told my parents what John had said, I thought they'd deny everything. I thought they'd say it was all in his head, that he was being too sensitive, that he misunderstood. That's what I was preparing for. But the reaction we got was nothing like that. My mom burst into tears immediately, like full-on sobbing, gasping for breath, the kind of crying that makes your stomach twist. My dad went completely red in the face, stood up, and slammed his fist into the wall so hard that the picture frame above the couch tilted sideways. It wasn't anger at John. It was something else. It was guilt. That's what made it worse. Because guilt meant there was truth in what he said. I tried to calm my mom down, but she kept shaking her head, repeating over and over, I didn't mean for it to be like this. I didn't mean it. My dad wasn't saying much at all, just pacing back and forth, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. He looked like a man ready to explode, but holding it in. Finally, my sister, the oldest, snapped. She yelled, then just admit it. Did you treat him differently? Yes or no? Silence. My mom's face crumpled. She whispered, sometimes, yes. That one word, yes, broke something in me. Because all these years, I'd been telling myself John was imagining things, or maybe he was just too independent for his own good. But now, my own mom was admitting it. She went on, through her sobs, trying to explain. She said she loved John, she really did. She said she had always cared for him, fed him, raised him, treated him like a son. But somewhere along the way, something changed. She said that when John hit puberty, she started to see him differently. She couldn't explain why. She said she still cared for him, but she felt this distance she couldn't shake. And then she admitted something that made my stomach twist. She had started becoming protective of me and my sister around him. Like she saw him as not safe. I wanted to scream when she said that. John had never ever given us a reason to feel unsafe. He was kind, gentle, sometimes quiet, but never dangerous, not once. And yet, in her eyes, he was other, not her blood, not her real son. That was why she pushed him away when he tried to hug her. That was why she let my brothers in close, but held him at arm's length. My dad finally sat down and buried his face in his hands. His voice was low when he said, "I should have seen it. I should have stopped it." But even he admitted there were times he felt John wasn't fully his, that maybe deep down he was holding back too. I think that was the first time I ever hated my parents. Not fully, not forever, but in that moment, I hated them for making John feel like a stranger in his own home, for confirming what he had feared for years. The worst part? John didn't even hear this confession directly. He wasn't in the room. He had already left after saying his piece. And now we were stuck with this ugly truth, unsure of what to do with it. That night, the house was heavy with silence. Nobody ate dinner, nobody spoke. My mom stayed in her room crying on and off. My dad drank 2 beers back to back, which he almost never does. I went to my room and just stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The hugs he never got, the invitations he missed, the look on his face when he said it would be inhuman to expect them to love me like they love you. And now I knew he was right. The next day, I tried to call John. He didn't pick up. I texted him, told him we needed to talk, that things weren't what he thought, that mom and dad were just struggling with their feelings but loved him anyway. But after I hit send, I realized how empty it sounded. Because what kind of love comes with conditions? What kind of love makes your son feel unwanted for simply existing? I didn't get a reply for 3 days. When he finally texted back, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness. It was worse. He wrote, "I get it. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Just take care of each other." That was all. It felt like a goodbye. For the next few weeks, things were weird in the house. Mom tried to act normal, cooking dinner, asking about work and school, but her smile never reached her eyes. Dad was quieter than usual, often sitting outside on the porch late at night, like he was waiting for something. My older siblings stayed out of the house more than in, and me and my twin kept exchanging worried looks whenever John's name came up. We were all thinking the same thing. What if John just cut us off completely? And honestly, part of me thought he should. If I were him, I'd have left long ago. But then came the moment that threw all of us back into chaos. One Saturday morning, we were eating breakfast when the doorbell rang. My dad went to open it, and standing there was John. Not smiling, not even neutral. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. And in his hand was a folded piece of paper. He didn't say a word to my dad. He just handed him the paper, turned, and walked away. My dad opened it slowly, right there in the doorway. I'll never forget his face when he read it. His lips trembled, his eyes widened. He turned as white as the paper itself. My mom rushed over, grabbed the note from his hands, and when she read it, she let out a sound I'd never heard before. Half gasp, half scream. The note wasn't long, but whatever was written on it was enough to make both of my parents look like they'd seen a ghost. And that's where everything spiraled again. My mom stood there frozen, her hand clutching the paper so tightly I thought it might tear. Her lips moved like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. My dad kept staring, his fists clenched at his sides. The room was silent, except for the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. "What is it?" my older brother asked. "What did he write?" My mom finally lowered the paper, her hand trembling. He doesn't want to come back," she whispered. But that wasn't all. She read the note aloud, her voice breaking with every word. "I've made peace with the fact that I was never really your son. I don't blame you anymore. I know you tried in your own way, but I can't keep pretending. Being around you only reminds me of what I'll never have. Please don't reach out. Please don't make this harder. I love you all, but from a distance. That's the only way I can survive. Goodbye." The word goodbye hung in the air like a curse. My sister gasped. My twin muttered, "No, no, no," under his breath. I felt my stomach drop like I was on a roller coaster plunging down a hill. Dad took the note back from Mom, rereading it over and over, like if he stared at the words long enough they might change. But they didn't. "Goodbye," he said quietly. Then louder, slamming his fist on the table. "Goodbye? He thinks he can just walk away from this family?" Mom flinched at his outburst. "Don't yell," she whispered. "This isn't about you." The argument that followed was the ugliest I'd ever seen between them. Mom sobbing, saying they'd failed John, that their mistakes had pushed him away. Dad shouting that John was being dramatic, ungrateful, selfish. My older sister screaming back at him that he was the selfish one for never noticing what John needed. I couldn't take it. I ran upstairs and shut my door, but their voices carried through the walls. And all I could think about was John, somewhere out there, alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw John's face at the door, pale, expressionless, like a man who had already decided to disappear. I texted him again. "Please, don't shut us out. I need my brother. I'm not ready to say goodbye." No response. Days turned into a week, then 2, still nothing. My parents didn't talk much anymore, just moved around the house like shadows. My dad was angry all the time, snapping at the smallest things. My mom's eyes were always red. But then came the twist we never saw coming. One evening, I was sitting in the living room when my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I opened it and my heart stopped. It was John. But not just John, it was a photo. The picture showed John sitting at a table in some small apartment. On the table was a glass of whiskey, half empty. His eyes were red, his face pale, but it wasn't his appearance that shocked me. It was what he was holding in his hand. A photo of us, our family. But every face in the picture had been scratched out, except his own. Beneath the photo, he'd written, "This is how it feels." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I called him instantly, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted, begging him to reply, to explain, to let me see him. Nothing. Days turned into a week, then 2, still nothing. My parents didn't talk much anymore, just moved around the house like shadows. My dad was angry all the time, snapping at the smallest things. My mom's eyes were always red. But then came the twist we never saw coming. One evening, I was sitting in the living room when my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I opened it and my heart stopped. It was John. But not just John, it was a photo. The picture showed John sitting at a table in some small apartment. On the table was a glass of whiskey, half empty. His eyes were red, his face pale, but it wasn't his appearance that shocked me. It was what he was holding in his hand. A photo of us, our family. But every face in the picture had been scratched out, except his own. Beneath the photo, he'd written, "This is how it feels." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I called him instantly, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted, begging him to reply, to explain, to let me see him. Nothing. When I showed my parents, my mom broke down all over again. Dad grabbed his car keys, saying he was going to find John right then and there, but he didn't even know where to look. He hadn't given us his address. He'd never told us exactly where he lived. That night, none of us slept. Every creak of the house, every buzz of the phone made me jump. The next morning, my sister got a call. From John. She put him on speaker. His voice was low, almost flat. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said. "I just wanted you to understand." "Understand what?" she asked, her voice shaking. "That I've been erased. That I was never really part of this. That's why I erased you from the picture. Because that's what it always felt like." Mom tried to jump in, sobbing, begging him to come home, to let them talk face to face. But John just said, "I'm not coming back. Stop asking me to." Then the line went dead. And that was the last time we heard his voice for weeks. The silence that followed was unbearable. Every day felt like walking through fog. My parents kept trying to reach out, texts, calls, voicemails, but John never answered. My older brother even drove around the city, checking apartments, asking people if they'd seen him, but no one had. It was like he vanished. And just when we thought maybe he'd truly disappeared forever, something else happened. One night, around 2 a.m., the doorbell rang again. We all woke up, confused, gathering at the front door. My dad opened it cautiously. There was no one there. Just a box. A plain brown box, taped shut, sitting on the porch. He brought it inside, set it on the table, and slowly opened it. Inside was another photo. This one was worse. It was a picture of our house, taken from the street, at night. And written across the back, in John's handwriting, were 4 chilling words. "I'm still watching you." When Dad pulled that photo out of the box, the whole room went silent. It wasn't just a picture of our house. It was a picture of us. A reminder that John wasn't gone. He was close. Close enough to stand outside in the dark, camera in hand, watching us when we had no idea. Mom gasped, clutching at her chest like she couldn't breathe. My twin muttered a curse under his breath. My sister whispered, "Oh my God," over and over like a prayer. Dad's hands were shaking as he flipped the photo over again, staring at those 4 words. "I'm still watching you." Nobody slept that night. Dad double-locked every door and window, pacing the house with a baseball bat like he was waiting for something to happen. Mom sat on the couch crying softly into her hands. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made us all jump. For the first time, we weren't just worried about John. We were scared of him. And that fear ate away at us. Dad kept insisting it was just a cry for attention. "He doesn't mean it," he said, even as he patrolled the yard at night with a flashlight. My sister disagreed, saying it was escalating, that we should call the police. But how do you report your own brother? What would we even say? Our son sent us a creepy photo of our house? Mom refused to involve the authorities. "He's still my boy," she whispered. "We don't hand him over to strangers. We fix this as a family." But none of us knew how. The following week was pure paranoia. I'd catch glimpses of movement outside the window, only to pull back the curtain and find nothing. My twin swore he saw someone standing by the tree line one night, but when Dad went out with the flashlight, the yard was empty. Then came the whispers. Neighbors started asking questions. Someone had seen a man in a hoodie standing across the street late at night, just watching the house. Another said they saw the same figure sitting in a parked car with the engine off, lights out. Every time we asked for details, height, anything, they couldn't be sure. But we didn't need them to be sure. We already knew who it was. John. Or at least we thought it was John. That uncertainty, the not knowing, was the worst part. Mom started leaving plates of food on the back porch, whispering prayers that John would take them. Dad threw them away in anger, saying she was encouraging him. That turned into screaming matches almost every night. My sister stopped coming home altogether, crashing with friends because she couldn't handle the tension. The family was unraveling, and at the center of it all was the boy who felt unloved. Then came the second box. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, left on the porch, just like the first one, smaller this time. Inside was a stuffed toy. It was John's old teddy bear, the one he used to carry everywhere when we were little. Its fur was matted and dirty, its eye hanging by a thread. But what made my blood run cold was the slit across its stomach. The stuffing had been ripped out, and tucked inside was another note. This is what I feel like. Empty. Mom collapsed when she read it. Dad crumpled the note in his fist and swore he'd find John, that he'd drag him back home if he had to. But there was nothing he could do. No return address, no clue where the box had come from. That night, I heard my parents arguing again, their voices rising through the thin walls. "This is your fault," Mom screamed. "You treated him like he wasn't yours, and now look." "And what about you?" Dad roared back. "You were the one who pushed him away. Don't you dare put this all on me." I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The words cut deep because they were true. Both of them were guilty. Both of them had failed him. But so had I. Because while they shouted, all I could think about was John's face when he handed over that first note. Pale, hollow, like he had already given up on us. And now he was circling us from the outside, reminding us of everything we had done, or failed to do. The spiral only got worse from there. Dad stopped going to work, too busy obsessing over security cameras he'd set up around the house. Mom barely ate, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. My twin slept with a knife under his pillow. Every shadow, every noise outside felt like John. We were living in constant fear of someone we all loved. Then, one night, the fear became real. It was around 3 a.m. when the alarm on the back door went off. We all jolted awake, hearts racing, as Dad grabbed the bat and rushed downstairs. I followed, adrenaline pumping. The back door was wide open. Cold night air blew into the kitchen. And there, on the floor, was another photo. This one was different. It wasn't our house. It wasn't scratched faces. It was us, taken through the living room window. All of us, sitting together, unaware we were being watched. And scrawled across the bottom in shaky handwriting were 5 words that made my blood run cold. "You'll miss me when I'm gone." The photo lay on the kitchen floor, the words burning into our eyes. "You'll miss me when I'm gone." Mom screamed. Dad staggered back like he'd been punched. My twin grabbed the photo, his hands shaking, muttering, "He was here. He was right outside, watching us." We tore through the house, checking every door, every window, every shadow. Nothing, no sign of him, just silence and the icy realization that John had been inside our world without us knowing. That night, none of us even tried to sleep. We sat together in the living room, all the lights on, waiting for something, anything to happen. Dad clutched the bat so tightly his knuckles went white. Mom sat rocking back and forth, whispering prayers under her breath. The hours crawled by, and then, at 4:17 a.m., it happened. A sharp knock at the front door. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Every hair on my body stood on end. Dad stood, motioning for silence. He crept toward the door, bat in hand, peering through the peephole. His face went pale. "It's him," he whispered. The air seemed to vanish from the room. My chest tightened, my pulse racing. "Open it," Mom whispered, her voice breaking. Dad hesitated, then unlocked the door and pulled it open. And there he was, John. Standing in the doorway, hood pulled up, eyes hollow, face gaunt. He looked older, harder, like years had passed in the weeks since we'd last seen him. In his hand, he held another envelope. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft hiss of the wind outside. Finally, Dad broke the silence. "John, son." "Don't call me that," John said flatly. His voice was cold, stripped of all warmth. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The air shifted with him, heavy and suffocating. Mom stood, tears streaming down her face. "We love you," she cried. "Please believe that." John's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Love? You called that love? You pushed me away every chance you got. You made me feel like a stranger in my own house. That's not love." "We made mistakes," Dad said, his voice shaking with anger and shame. "But we raised you. We gave you everything we could." John's eyes locked on him, except what mattered. The words hit like a knife. My sister stepped forward, her voice trembling. "John, please, we want to fix this. Just tell us what you need." John reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope, dropping it onto the table with a thud. "I already told you," John said. "I don't need anything. I just wanted you to see what you did to me." Mom picked up the envelope with trembling hands, opened it, and gasped. Inside were dozens of photographs. All of them of John. Alone, sitting in empty apartments, standing on street corners, eating by himself. Year after year, picture after picture, documenting his isolation. "This is my life," John said, his voice breaking for the first time. "This is what you created. You raised me like I was temporary, like I was never really yours. And now I don't even know who I am without that pain. Mom collapsed into sobs, begging him to stop, to forgive them. Dad stood frozen, the bat slipping from his grip. But John wasn't done. You don't get to fix this, he said. You don't get to cry your tears and pretend it never happened. You can't erase years of making me feel unwanted. The room was thick with silence, broken only by Mom's wails. And then John said the words that shattered us all. I'm not your son. I never was. And after tonight, you'll never see me again. He turned toward the door. Panic surged through me. I ran forward, grabbing his arm. No, please, John, don't do this. You're my brother. You'll always be my brother. For a moment, his mask cracked. His eyes glistened, his jaw trembling. I saw the boy I grew up with, the one who laughed at dumb jokes, who stayed up playing games with us, who used to hug me goodnight. But then it was gone. He pulled his arm free, his face hard again. You're too late. He stepped out into the night. Dad lunged after him, yelling his name, but John was already running down the street, swallowed by the darkness. We stood there in the doorway, watching him disappearing, knowing this wasn't just him walking away. This was the end. Mom collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad punched the wall again, his knuckles bleeding. My siblings and I just stood there, broken, lost, unsure of what came next. Because John wasn't bluffing. This time, he meant it. And deep down, we all knew we might never see him again. Weeks passed. No word from John. No calls, no texts, no sightings. It was like he had vanished off the face of the earth. We tried to move on, pretend life was normal, but the house felt emptier than ever, like a part of it had been ripped out and taken with him. Then one morning, we found something in the mailbox. A single envelope, no return address. Inside was a photograph. It was our family again. Mom, Dad, all of us siblings, smiling in an old Christmas picture. Every face had been scratched out, except John's. And beneath it, in neat, careful handwriting, were 3 words. Not forgotten yet.